Well, welcome, Julian. I did said in the intro a lot about your fantastic background and how we connected to share your thoughts on boutiques and more. Tell me, if you don't mind, and for our listeners, my friend, how did you get started in fitness in general?
Well, first of all, Brian, thank you for the invitation to join you on the podcast today. Really looking forward to it.
Thank
The
you.
question I get asked most often is, why did I leave the practice of law to join fitness? And the response is, I grew up in fitness, and when I went to practice law, that was a deviation from my upbringing. So very briefly, I got dragged into the fitness industry by my mom when I was age 6, and she was a public school teacher, and she started volunteering at the local YWCA in White Plains, New York. So for the next 3 or 4 years, and I'm an only child, so only children go where mom goes. So when mom is at the YWCA, I'm at the YWCA, wondering, what am I doing here in this room with all these little girls and leotards on gymnastics? I didn't know what she was doing, but that's literally how we got started. Then I became a tennis player and a competitive tennis player, and started teaching tennis, became USPTA certified when I was in law school. And then I really jumped into the tennis industry. Many of your listeners will know Alan Swartz as the founder of Midtown Tennis Athletic Club. Alan was chairman of the board of the U.S. Tennis Association, and I was what they would consider a national volunteer, like a junior board member for 12 years. And Alan was my mentor in the tennis industry. So I actually got into the business of fitness first from listening to mom talk about her challenges at the YWCA. Then 20 years later, Alan was very kind enough to put me in positions to advise different members of the USTA staff around sales, marketing, recruitment, and retention, all the same issues that we are dealing with and we'll talk about today. So I've grown up in this, basically. It's a short answer.
That's a great answer. I think it's wonderful when you hear those stories, you know. I think that it's really informative about your background and how that path is different for different people, but it's always a wonderful place that you landed. You know, we had an opportunity to talk a little bit conceptually the other week before the podcast, and we were talking about boutiques, which is your subject matter expertise, obviously. We talked about the life cycle of boutiques. Tell me about boutiques in general in your view. What do you see? How would you characterize the industry right now?
So when I have conversations like this, I like to define who we're talking about, because for the investor community, especially, I see a lot of posts on LinkedIn and people talking about boutiques, but those people are generally investors, and they're talking about it as if the boutique world consists of Barry's, Orange Theory, Soul Cycle, Solidcore, and F45. Those are the five most dominant brands. But as a percentage of locations in the United States, they probably represent less than 5% of physical locations where people exercise. So yes, they're boutique. Yes, they are premium brands. And yes, they're the industry leaders. But the studios that we surveyed in the report that we're going to talk about today are overwhelmingly independently owned studios. It's the former instructor, coach, trainer who opens up his or her own space. Maybe it's typically a corporate woman executive who leaves corporate America after 10 years and opens up a studio, and she might get to 3 or 4, but it's very rarely a PE finance group of 20 to 30 franchisees. That's not the majority owner in the space. It's coach trainer who owns her own space. And if she's fortunate and works hard and lucky, she might get 3 or 4 or 5 locations, or is corporate expat who enters the space. So that's who we're talking about generally. The good news is the industry is growing. In our 2022 report, we noted that only 9.2% of studios were generating a profit margin of 20% or more, 9.2. And in our most recent report, the 2024 report, we saw that number double to 17.4% of profit margin of 20% or more. So that's good news. And, BFS is a membership-based organization, and our members are focused on scaling. And I can tell you that at least half of our members are in the process of opening a new location. And then the half that are not either recently opened a new location or they're thinking about scaling internally. And I know we're going to talk later about the convergence of wellness and longevity. We're starting to see some studios choose a scaling model that focuses on adding other services to their existing location rather than signing another 10-year lease for another space. My point is, they wouldn't be opening new spaces. They wouldn't be adding recovery and wellness and longevity if they weren't optimistic about the future of this industry. So that's the synopsis is the industry is growing, the profit margin has increased, and the majority of our members are optimistic and growth oriented.
Yeah, I can see that. And by the way, listeners, we're going to have a link in the show notes for Julian's organization to obtain the research and to learn more about what he's talking about. So when you and I were visiting, and I think that's a very good observation you just set forth by the lack of concentration by PE firms and how broad the market really is. So we were talking earlier, we were talking a little bit about the history of the modern boutique fitness industry. I told you it's been many years when SoulCycle, for example, was the most profitable margin fitness business in the world. I told people that was a while back. But tell me about your perception of boutique with those kind of start out kind of brands that started defining the segment.
So if you ask a martial artist, they will say that they were the true originators with martial arts studios and judo and karate. I don't know when the first karate studio was, but probably far earlier than the first Pilates studio. We know Joseph Pilates and his disciples started opening Pilates studios in New York City. And forgive me, the yoga world will probably say that they were first.
They were, yeah.
And then martial arts, both of those being deeply intertwined into ancient cultures. But the commercial fitness industry started approximately in 1950, as you know.
Yeah.
And so to say that the first boutique, the first modern commercially successful boutique being Barry's started in 1999, from 1950 to 1999, that's about right. That's two generations, 1950 to 70 and 70 to 90-ish. And then SoulCycle in 2006. And then you had Physique 57 is 19 years old. So what is that, 25, 05, 06? So Physique 57, about the same time as SoulCycle. So what you have here, and then shortly thereafter, Bar 3 and Sadie and Chris Lincoln, what you have here is the OGs are not only still living, they're either still running their business, like Sadie and Chris and Jennifer Manavy from Physique, or they've exited, but the business is still around, like SoulCycle. And so while you don't have Julie and Elizabeth, and she's going to kill me for forgetting her name, the third founder. We have to edit this out because she's going to kill me. While the original Soul founders aren't running the business, you now have an experienced management, third generation CEO. So it's very new. The point I'm making is this industry is very new. And I don't just mean new in terms of it's only been around for 20 years, but the ecosystem that supports it. I mean, there's a reason Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley, right? It goes back to Stanford in 1930s, 40s, and right. And so then once one business becomes popular, then other service providers come in. Well, that's still happening, right? We can't even say that is fully happened. And the notion of let's look at Solidcore, for example. Ann founded it, handed it off to Bryan Myers, the current CEO, and he's running it now. That's just the second CEO of one of the most successful fitness studios. Conversely, how many CEOs has McDonald's had? How many CEOs has Yum Brands had? Has KFC? It takes time for for an industry to really take hold. And I think that's still where we are in terms of the industry. It's young.
Yeah.
It's still attracting professional talent. And again, Brian Myers would be a good example. Ann was the founder.
Yeah.
Brian came in from consulting and from Sweetgreens, and now you have that level of professional executive. Evelyn Webster, SoulCycle, professional executive. That Core Power Yoga, and forget the woman's name, but a professional CEO. That's still the exception, unfortunately, in the industry. And I say unfortunately, not because we don't want founders coming from trainers, but because we do. Like, that's where the innovation comes from. I would argue, though, and I've never thought about this before, Brian. I've never made this point before, but I would argue that fitness might be, or boutique fitness specifically, might be better served following the model of the fashion industry, where Donna and Calvin and Tommy are the creative faces of their brands, but they don't run the business day to day. They have a business operator in that role. And we still have too many founders who came up from the ranks of teacher trainer in that role. And I think that might be one of the reasons some of these brands aren't scaling as fast as they otherwise could, the lack of professional managers. And if there was that partnership like fashion has, where Ralph is the face of Ralph Lauren, but he's not, I don't think, creating spreadsheets, conducting analysis, doing, KPI reviews and developing ICPs. There's a professional team doing that, but he's still the creative force and genius. I think that might be a model that the fitness industry might want to consider.
Interesting observation. We were talking too about modalities. So, we're talking about single modalities, other modalities, and then of course the resurgence of Pilates in the recent past. What do you see is going on there in your mind?
So let's talk about single versus multiple modality, then that'll drive into Pilates. It's really a couple things. I went back and I read your report from 2015, The Rise of Boutique Fitness Studios, and it was amazing how many of the comments you made 10 years ago apply today. If I may take liberty, I'm going to connect the dots here. You said 10 years ago, the secret to long-term viability for studios is their ability to generate higher revenues per customer. That's what Pilates is doing. You said boutique studios require less space and have lower relative operating costs. That's one of the reasons why Pilates studios generate higher total revenue and higher profit margin. Smaller footprint, scarcity business model. You said that studios' higher profitability enables boutiques to create a far superior consumer experience. That is still the case today with boutique fitness studios. I'm amazed. Whenever I'm on the road, I try and visit a gym or a studio, and I'm amazed that there's still big box gyms with sales reps walking guests around the gym doing a features and benefits tour. And here's the weight section, and here's the spinning room, and here are the kettlebells. It's 2025. What are we doing? Right? It should be outcome focused, not features and benefits focused. You wrote 10 years ago that boutique fitness studios work hard to give their customers a distinctive, bespoke experience. Same thing still happening today. And you wrote that it is the communities that these brands create that are of greatest appeal to fitness consumers today. All of those things you wrote 10 years ago are still applicable today, and they're a partial answer to your question and a reason why Pilates studios are still according to our research, they are the most profitable. If I could show a slide here for
sure.
listeners.
Yeah, please.
Let me pull this up. This is one of the favorite takeaways from the report is that we segmented the studios that participated in the survey by modality and by market size. So a city is a population of 500,000 or more. And so we have Pilates in the city, Pilates in suburbs, strength city, strength suburbs, yoga city, yoga suburbs, and then all modalities. So 7 categories. And as you can see here, the most profitable studios among the studios that participated in our survey, the most profitable were Pilates studios in cities. And the majority of them, not the majority, 38% of those studios had a profit margin of 20% or more. And this is despite the fact that reformers cost $1,000 to $1,500. And I'm going to make a note here, because if you see at the bottom of the screen, yoga is the exact opposite. All yoga, regardless of city or suburb, is generating between the majority of yoga studios are between 1% and 9% profitable. And this is despite the fact that a good yoga mat costs less than $100 versus a reformer machine, which costs at least $1,000. So Pilates equipment costs on average 9 to 10 times more than yoga, and they're still more profitable. And why is that? Scarcity business model. The typical Pilates reformer location has a minimum of, well, some of them are strictly privates. Then if they're grouped, they typically have 4 to 6 machines, up to 12. That means their footprint is smaller. We're talking, let me show you this next slide. These Pilates studios are more profitable because they're relying on a scarcity business model. They need fewer people. They're charging more for those services to those people. And because they only have 6 to 12 machines, they take up less space. They're renting smaller spaces. Their rent is lower. And because they only have 6 to 12 people in a studio, many of them don't have front desks, and their managers, some of them have managers. Generally, one location may not have a manager, but multiple locations will, right? So you're talking about just the fundamentals of brick and mortar businesses in the US. What are the key drivers of profitability? Payroll and lease.
That's right.
If you have a smaller space, you have a smaller smaller lease. And if you're only serving 6 to 12 people, you don't need a team of 40 personal trainers like a 30,000 square foot gym does. So your payroll is smaller. Now, keep in mind, more profitable doesn't mean better. We're only talking about from a business standpoint, who's having higher profits, higher revenues. We're not having a conversation about which workout is better. I'm not an exercise scientist or physiologist. That's not my purview. I'm strictly talking about which business model is more profitable and why.
Yeah, makes complete sense.
That was one of your questions. Your other question was, what am I seeing about single modality versus multiple modality? And the answer is, the studios are a reflection of society. And starting from COVID through now, there's been, let's call them the super influencers, especially on the women's side. I'm talking Dr. Stacy Sims. I'm talking Dr. Rhonda Patrick and Dr. Gabrielle Lyons. And these women and others like them have been preaching the benefits of strength training to women.
Yes.
And so that aligns with the consistent top 5 ranking of free weight training in ACSM surveys for the last 6 years. You take pop culture, you take influencer culture, you take the COVID lockdown when all we had at home was body weight training, and the I don't want to call it new, but the heightened emphasis on women's health. And you go down the line of women's conditions, and generally women's health conditions, regardless of what the condition is, one of the recommendations is strength training, right? So all of those things have aligned to the fact where it's rare now to find a profitable studio that does one thing. And even Pilates, trivia question for you, in your capacity as the CEO of Core Health and Fitness, do you know which operating brand is the largest client of TRX in the country?
Club Pilates.
Of course, you know the answer. Club Pilates. Club Pilates. Who among your listeners would ever have thought that Club Pilates buys more TRX equipment than any other operator? So even in Pilates, they're incorporating strength. And you see a lot of indoor cycling studios that are adding HIIT or strength. Even a very popular yoga studio in New York, ID Yoga, has incorporated Pilates mat. So it's rare to find, even bar studios have strength classes or HIIT classes. So it's rare to find a single modality studio that is successful and thriving. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, it's just rare.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And Julian, please, for the listeners, we're going to attest that you did not give me the answer to that question before you this podcast.
No. That is why you are Brian K. O'Rourke.
So everyone's talking about the convergence of fitness, recovery, longevity, of course, beauty, all these things. What do you see there in that trend? Because there's been a lot of things that have gone on there. It's not quite solidifying. Well, what is your view on that?
It's the same. It's the same conversation we just had. It's the super influencers. So now you throw in Huberman and Atia, and you throw in not when and what's the guy's name? Dan Buettner from Blue Zones. When you start seeing articles about Blue Zones and longevity in People magazine on my Apple reader, that tells you we've jumped the shark, right? In a good way. In a good way. So the fact that longevity and well-being are words that are now common in the common vernacular, studio owners don't live in a bubble. If their members are talking about longevity, studio owners have to serve their members' needs. And so the convergence typically comes either from within, where the members are asking for more services, or I mentioned earlier at the beginning that some of our members who are scaling are choosing to scale internally, not by opening new locations. I'll give you an example. 3 different hot yoga studios, one in New Hampshire, one in Maryland, one in LA. The one in New Hampshire is adding additional recovery services, red light therapy, cold plunge, some other services in their existing space instead of opening new spaces. The hot yoga studio right outside DC, suburban Maryland, already they have cryotherapy, they have physical therapy, massage therapy, they've added IV drips, they're starting to add HRT and peptides, and then the hot yoga, well, not hot, the traditional yoga studio in downtown LA has a second space, and they're building up their fitness programming and adding Pilates mat classes. So these are 3 yogis by every definition who recognize that their growth strategy has to include delivering a broader range of services. So whether it's, and by the way, the one in Maryland is also going to start adding some beauty services. She's already bought the Imcella equipment, and I know another yoga studio in Michigan that's already, it's 3 locations. Its highest grossing location is the one that offers skincare treatments. At the end of the day, the majority of the clients at boutique fitness studios are women, are middle class and up women, and these women are purchasing a wide range of personal care services. And I'm not saying everyone should do everything. I'm not saying that, but there is likely an opportunity to serve some of those of your members' additional well-being needs. I'm not saying it should be like Love Life in El Segundo, which has everything. That's unreasonable for the
Right.
average person. That's 45,000 square feet. But if you think about your clients having a personal well-being budget, and you're only capturing 15, 20% of that budget because you only offer one thing, can you offer a second thing to go from 20% of their budget to 30%, right? Just one more
Yeah.
thing, right? To drive
Yeah.
profitability. So I'm seeing a convergence of fitness, wellness, beauty, recovery, not because people don't know what to do, but rather because it's the owners trying to serve more of their clients' well-being needs. Do more than
Yeah.
one thing. Not do everything, but do more than one thing.
Sure. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So, what are your thoughts on strength training in general when it comes to boutiques? We talked a little bit about, modalities, having multiple modalities. We know the research in the last few years on strength, its importance, especially with women, target group you're mentioning, osteoporosis and other things, and how important it is. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Strength is hot. It's on fire. I went back and looked at some numbers before our conversation. 2019, it was top 5 ranking in the ACSM trends. In 2025, it's top 5 ranking. So it's been consistent. What I think has changed has been the focus of free weight training and strength training among women. I mean, every day there's a different video popping into my
Yeah.
Instagram feed where a woman influencer says what she would tell her younger self is strong, not skinny. And I think it's really
Hmm.
important that it's women telling other women strong, not skinny. So they're not getting the message that this is what the male dominant society is telling women they should do. No, it's women telling other women that they should be strong, not skinny. And again, women are half the population. So that right there by itself explains the growth of strength training. When you go to the Olympic lifting racks, which I was just there Sunday, Monday, whatever, 2 days ago, and right next to me on the Olympic lifting platform was a tall woman who was squatting heavy weight, like plate and a half. Like
Yep.
that wasn't the case even 5 years ago. I give
Yep.
CrossFit a lot. I give CrossFit a lot of credit for that. High Rocks deserves a lot of credit for that. I would just say that it is a societal phenomena that we see represented in multiple different ways. It's not one thing. It's the Instagram super influencer. It's High Rocks. It's CrossFit. It's the fashion models who are talking about their weight training routines, and people, and its longevity, and its doctors. It's all of it, and it must be great for you in your core capacity to see you might be selling more strength equipment to places that you probably weren't selling to 5 or 10 years ago.
That's right. A lot of major brands have rethought their fitness floor layouts. Even Planet has shifted to more strength focus in the recent past. So yeah, we've seen that quite a bit. Boutiques really were kind of part of the whole class pass kind of dynamic, and intermediaries, and then how they did their business models with memberships versus prepaid bundles of classes, and then you had all these apt intermediaries coming around. Talk about those trends. What do you see happening there now, Julian?
You just hit the third rail, the New York City subway third rail with that question. Look, if we talk about the history of boutiques, when they first started, one of their value propositions was that you didn't need to be locked into a membership. Okay, you could buy a 5-pack, 10-pack, single pack, and that was great. And we started to see a movement away from that before COVID. And what we really saw in COVID was there are a couple of reasons why studios failed. If you had a landlord who was intransigent and just wouldn't play ball with you, there's nothing you could do, right? You were going to go. You're going to go out of business. Or if you were already on your last legs, then COVID was literally just the last strong, gust to knock you over. So let's define what constituted a studio on its last legs. And I would say, in my experience, studios that were excessively dependent on third-party aggregators. And I'll never forget, one studio owner told me pre-COVID that she was paying one payroll period per month from one of the aggregators. She was reliant on for 25% of her revenue from a third-party aggregator. This is despite the fact, I will quote Fritz here because he's been public in saying the following: ClassPass is intended to fill your excess capacity. Excess. If you have 20 spots, and the night before there are 3 left, then the third-party aggregator should help you sell those last 3. And unfortunately, we saw too many studios that used third-party aggregators to sell all 20 spots. And that's not the intended use of third-party aggregate. Don't trust me. Google Fritz, ClassPass, excess. These are his words. Okay. So what you have now, what you had in COVID, going back to the membership model, the studios that survived were the studios that had recurring revenue. And I don't use the word memberships or class packs. It's recurring payments and auto pays that's more important than your definition of the membership. And so we come full circle, just like your article 10 years ago still applies today. Well, in 2006, when SoulCycle started with class packs, they wanted to get away from memberships. Now, we talked earlier about professional business managers. Now it's generally understood that the 3 most important letters for any business are monthly recurring revenue, i.e. subscriptions, i.e. memberships. So we see more and more studios relying on memberships because it's just good business to be able to forecast what your revenue is going to be next month, the month after, and the month after. So I hope that answers your question. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
More and more of that.
Yeah. And, it's not just boutiques, even full service, well, any retail business. I tell people, read your user license agreements and make sure you're knowing who you're getting into bed with, because I think a lot of companies don't realize what they're really getting into, and it can end up being very costly in the end and not really do for you what you think it will. So
Absolutely.
I think that's wisdom. Yeah.
I know.
What about?
Go ahead. I know we're running out of time. I want to mention one thing, if I may.
Yeah. Please.
This is my new cause du jour, right? We've talked about strength training today, and of course Pilates is hot, strength training is hot, but I think, and correspondingly, indoor cycling is not as hot for the last 5 years. So I'm going to give a free, unsolicited tip to every indoor cycling studio listening to this podcast. I think there is a massive opportunity for indoor cycling studios to rely on the research from people like Dr. Peter Attia, who, when you ask him what are the 2 drivers of longevity, the answer is
VO2 max,
strength, and VO2 max. And if you ask him, how do you improve VO2 max? The answer is cardio. So our society goes from extreme to extreme.
Yeah.
It's not Pilates or weight training or yoga or cardio. It's all of it, right?
Yes.
But specifically, it's strength. And for this purpose, we will include Pilates under strength. It's strength and it's VO2 max. And this is not Julian Barnes and Brian O'Rourke saying this. This is the doctors who are experts in longevity saying VO2 max and strength. So, Evelyn, if you're listening, and every other indoor cycling studio owner, I know you can't use scientific terms in your marketing to consumers, but there has to be a way for you to incorporate the same way that strength is sexy now. Endurance should be made sexy using the existing research. I just don't see or hear any of the so-called super influencers talking about the direct correlation between indoor cycling, VO2 max, and longevity. And I think that is a potential pathway for the rebound for indoor cycling studios. What do you think?
It's just a matter of time. Yeah, the pendulum always swings. I mean, you're exactly right. Too much of one thing isn't a good thing. I think it's a balance of both. I know in my own training, that's a big deal for me. And even when people are doing strength training, which they have increasingly, and I do strength training, I'm still an avid believer in my VO2 max. I measure it actively because of that reason. And I think a lot of people, you're right, they just need to be reminded, and these things go in waves and cycles. So yes, I think that's a very good observation. Well, listen, Julian, I like to ask this last question with all of my interviews, and thank you again for joining us. Our listeners are obviously going to enjoy your wisdom and insights. What pearls of wisdom? You're a lawyer. You have a lot of background in the industry space. What pearls of wisdom would you share with entrepreneurs today in the industry space? What advice do you have to give?
People starting out or people who are already in business?
Well, it doesn't matter. You tell me.
So this is not an original answer. I'm going to repeat what far more successful business leaders have been saying for 20, 30 years. Is focus on the one thing that's the most important thing to get you to the next milestone. It's so easy for us to fall victim to bright, shiny object syndrome. And that almost never works. I'm a huge sports fan, and I love listening to, let me back up. This is not even about sports. I'm a huge fan of high performing achievers, regardless of their discipline. And when you listen to them talk, there's a word that I've heard consistently used by athletes, entertainers, CEOs, and that word is obsessed, and versions of it. Obsessed, obsessive, obsession. And I would say my advice for any business owner is to be obsessed about the one driver that can move your business to the next level. I don't mean achieve your goals and dreams, just the next milestone. Be obsessively focused on that one thing that is the primary driver to get you to the next milestone. That would be my recycled advice that I've learned from others over the years.
I agree with that advice. I think that's great advice, Julian. Julian, thank you so much for making time for the audience and sharing your wisdom. And as I mentioned, folks, in the show notes, you're going to see a lot of links about Julian, et cetera, to learn more about his network and to obtain some more of his research, which is always very well received. So, Julian, I hope to see you again soon and really appreciate your thoughts and time.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for your time, Bryan. Had a lot of fun today.